In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful, may peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah the Almighty be upon all of you. I am Umar bin Abid, and you are watching Umar Linguistics. So, dear viewers, today our lecture is 16 of the study of language, and the title is Place of Articulation. So, we have started chapter 3, The Sounds of Language or Phonetics from the Study of Language by George Joule, and it's the latest 7th edition. So the same video you can watch in Urdu or you can say in Hindi as well. I have given the link in the description below. So before starting this lecture, I would like to tell you that I have also made another video on the place of articulation, which is actually a detailed video, and it is that video is actually about 40 minutes. So if you want to understand phonetics in detail, you can watch that video as well. But if this is your first time to study place of articulation, then I would recommend that watch this video and then you can move to that video as well. And because those students who are just studying linguistics during their graduation just for one time, I think this lecture is enough for them. I think they don't need to understand it in very detail. However, if they are interested, so they can watch that lecture as well. I have added the link of Urdu video as well. If you don't understand English, so you can watch in Urdu, and I have also added that link as well, in which I have discussed this in detail, and even that video is also available both in Urdu and English language. So let's start. So what is place of articulation? So in articulatory phonetics, as we have discussed that in this chapter we shall focus on just articulatory phonetics, that how and from where from in our vocal tract we produce certain sounds. So in articulatory phonetics, usually we study the place of articulation, which means that which part of our vocal tract takes part in the production of a sound. So whenever we produce sound, so our mouth takes a certain position and our articulators move and touches at certain places in mouth. Sometimes to teeth, sometimes lips are involved, sometimes the palate is involved, sometimes the velum is involved. So before we start, or before we know some sounds from as compared to the and we know their places of articulation, so before this we should be familiar with the different places of our vocal tract. So this is actually the pharynx wall, and this whole cavity is pharynx, which is around 14 inches long. Then this is the uvula, is actually a small flap which hangs back in our mouth, and when we look in the mirror and put our tongue outside of our mouth, so we can see it is the uvula. Then this is the velum is actually the soft palate. If you touches here just before here in our mouth, in your mouth, so it is actually a soft place which is called soft palate or velum. Then here we have hard palate, this path before, this is the teeth, and this is the alveolar ridge. You can say a mass of thick, you can say thick and a little bit rigid place just upper your just behind your upper teeth. It is alveolar ridge, this place you can touch it with your mouth. Then before it, behind it we have hard palate, you can also touch it, and behind it we have soft palate, which is also known as velum. All right, so this is actually the principal parts of the upper surface of the vocal tract. So these are all places of the upper surface of the vocal tract. All right, and I have taken this picture from the book A Course in Phonetics, which is actually a detailed book on phonetics. So this was the upper part of our vocal tract. Then we have the lower part of our vocal tract as well, and this is the lower lip. This is called the tip of the tongue. This is sometimes called the blade of the tongue. This is called the front of the tongue. This is called the center of the tongue, and this is called the back of the tongue, and this is called the root of the tongue. So actually in this book, The Study of Language, we don't have to we don't need to discuss, or we don't need to understand all these places in detail, but I am just introducing you. And this is called the epiglottis, which actually covers our you can say esophagus, our tract of food when we speak. So actually it covers that place. So let me show you the picture of the vocal tract, which is given in the study of language as well, because many of you might have been studying this chapter from that book, and actually we are studying from that, and our purpose is to understand that chapter from the study of language. So this is the human vocal tract given in the you can say in the study of language. Actually those picture which I have just showed you, they are explaining in a little bit detail. So same is here. You can say this is the alveolar, is just behind and the upper teeth. Then this is the palate. Then this is the velum, which is also known as soft palate. Then this is the uvula, which is actually a small actually those pictures are more, you can say more similar to the actual vocal tract. And this is the nasal cavity. This is actually the velum, soft palate, and this is the pharynx, and this is the tongue, which we have divided into several parts, and these are the vocal folds, and this is the larynx. All right, so this is the picture given in the study of language by George Hull, 7th edition, but it's better if you understand this picture. So while transcribing consonants, there are some symbols we have to look at. V plus is used for voice sound, and V minus is used for to represent voiceless sounds. And sounds are usually enclosed in square brackets. Actually, this is not the topic of this lecture. I have discussed this in that series, A Course in Phonetics, that when we have to use square brackets and when we have to use slanting brackets. This is the topic of the other series which I have told you, A Course in Phonetics, which is actually a detailed introduction to phonetics. I have also added the link of that in the description below. So there are some familiar sounds or familiar symbols, because IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, it gives a symbol to each sound. So there are some symbols for sounds which are familiar to us, or which are usually familiar to those as well, even who don't study phonetics. So sounds produced when both lips join together, and one of these familiar sounds are bilabials. So it is one of the place of articulation. Bilabials mean, so actually each sound represent the place of articulation. So sound produced when both lips, upper and lower lip, come together. So these are the bilabial sound, like p, b, m. If you produce p, b, m, so your lips will come together. And even in wa is not actually a completely bilabial, but when we produce wa, our sides of the tongue, sides of the lips meet together. So therefore it is also known as the bilabial sound, because edges of the lips join each other. Then b and m are among these, b and m are considered voiced sounds, and whereas p is considered voiceless. B minus. Then the examples are pat, bat, mat, boat, white. So we can say that in p, this is voiceless, b is voiced, m is voiced, boat is also voiced, in b is also voiced, and in white, w is actually a voice sounds. The other familiar sounds to us are labiodentals, f and w. Actually these are familiar sounds because they are just like the normal alphabets of English. Therefore we are calling these familiar sounds. So labiodental, as the name suggests, some part of lip and some part of teeth will involve in such sounds. So what happens, the consonants we produce when the upper teeth touch the lower lip. Actually while producing speech, only our lower jaw moves, upper jaw does not move. You can notice that the lower jaw is more mobile. It moves constantly while producing, not the upper jaw. So actually what happens when we produce f and v, the lower lip come together, towards the upper teeth. And examples are foot, f in foot, v in vote, and photo. So don't be confused with the letters. Ph represent one sound, f. Then f is sorry, it is actually wrong. F is actually a voiceless sound, while the v is actually the voiced sound. All right. Then alveolars. Uh, the place of articulation is alveolar. What is alveolar? I have already showed you. Let me show you once again. Yes, this is the alveolar, the surface of a thick and rigid mass just behind the upper teeth. This is called the alveolar ridge. So those sounds which are in when our tip of the tongue or blade of the tongue touches the rigid part just behind the upper teeth, these are known as alveolar sounds, which are articulated when the front part of the tongue touches just above the upper teeth to a rough bony ridge known as alveolar ridge. And there are a lot of alveolar sounds in English, like s, z, n, t, d, l, r, z, n, l, r. And among these, s is voiceless, z is voiced, n is voiced, t is voiceless, d is voiced, d is voiced, l is also voiced, r is also voiced. All right. And example are suit, the s and t in suit, buzz, the last sound, truck, the first sound is alveolar, train, the first and the last sound are alveolar, not, the first sound and the last sound are alveolar, look, the first sound is alveolar, root, the first and the last sound is alveolar, in raise, the last sound is alveolar. Once again, don't be confused with spelling, especially when you are studying English, because spelling represent many sound, different combination of spelling represent many sound. Raise, so this is the sound. Now there are some unfamiliar symbols. These are not no more unfamiliar to students who study phonetics or those who are phonetician, but these are unfamiliar sounds to those uh, who don't study phonetics, or usually because these symbols do not use in actual writing. First of all, among these symbols are dentals and interdentals. Actually, these are the sounds when our tongue touches behind the upper teeth. So these sounds are called dentals. The sounds are found while the tongue tip touch behind the upper front teeth. So these are called the dental sounds, and such sounds are also produced sometimes with the tongue slightly touching between the upper and the lower teeth. So what happens sometimes, just inside, oh sorry, just between the upper and lower teeth, the tongue protrudes like s. If you produce this sound s, while keeping your tongue behind the between the upper and the lower teeth, so in that case this sound will be called as interdentals. So actually in different varieties of English, sometimes speaker produce this sound when tongue touches just behind the upper teeth, behind the upper teeth, yes, not on alveolar ridge but on upper teeth. And sometime in some varieties of English, speaker produce these sound with the tongue protruding, with the tongue coming between the upper and the lower teeth. In that case, the same sounds are called interdentals. There are two actually interdental sounds or dental sound in English, s and z. It is actually the, which is usually produced in at the beginning of the, or at sometimes at the beginning of, not sometimes but always, them. And then this sound which comes at the beginning of sing or thank you, or at the end of aids. So there are many incidents. So it is actually called theta sound, and it is or eth, and this sound is called engma, engma. And s is voiced and the is voiceless. sorry, voiced, and this is voiceless. Then among some other unfamiliar sounds are palatals. So just behind the alveolar ridge, let me show you again. Yes, just behind the alveolar ridge, this place is the hard palate. If you touch your finger here, you will find the hard place. It is actually called the hard palate, or just palatal as well. Palatal. All right. So behind the alveolar ridge, we will find a hard part. This is called palate, and the sound produced when tongue touches actually the center of the tongue. The center of the tongue touches this part, the hard palatal. Let me show you this once again. So this is the center part of the tongue, and actually this touches. It is just beneath. It is just beneath the hard palatal. So when center of the tongue touches the palate, it is called. These are called palatal sounds. Hanji. So these are the palatal sounds. So among these are sh. So it is an unfamiliar sound to you. Sh, which is comes at the beginning of ship. Then we have ch sound. Then we have j sound. Then we have this sound y. It is it seems like j letter, but it sounds like y. So it sh comes at the beginning of shore, chalk, jewel. Now you can see the letter is j, but the sound is jewel. All right, and this sound is also yes. It is not. We cannot say that it is z. So it is actually yes, yes. But it comes at the end of some words or between some words. So this sound comes at the beginning of word, usually yes, you. But this sound yeah, it usually comes at the in between some words, pleasure. So if you look up in the dictionary, so you will find such symbols as well. Let me show you. So this is the Oxford Advanced Learner Dictionary, one of the best dictionaries of English. And in that in this dictionary, whenever you write a word, so you will find its transcription as well. So you can say pleasure. So it comes in the middle. And if I show you you, yes, so it will come, you can see in the beginning of word. So and that sound pleasure, which is usually in pleasure, it comes in the beginning, in between a word. All right. So there are also other example of these. For example, ship, shoe. And if I talk about chalk, chatter, cheese. If we talk about this so even jelly, jowl, jot, and sometimes it also comes between some sound like hinge. Now if we talk about this word hinge, now g representing this sound, g, hinge. Then pleasure, and other words. There are also other examples as well. Pleasure, and you can say treasure, and this sound you, yes, yellow. Many examples. Then we have Velars. So in Velar, two sounds are actually, one sound is actually familiar to us. This is kh sound. So kh is a Velar sound. So what are Velar sound? When the back of the tongue touches the soft palate, or you can say velum. There is a soft palate called soft palate or velum. So when back of the tongue or just tongue touches this place, soft palate, so the sound produced in this way are called velum. If you produce kh, 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 and slowly produce, and you will notice that your back of the tongue will touches the soft palatal. So sound produced in this way are called velar sounds. Let me show you once again through the diagram so you will understand better. So this is the back of the tongue, and it is just beneath the soft palatal. It is the soft palatal, and it will touch here, and in this way you will produce velar sounds. So kh, g and ing. So these are some sounds. So actually when we have to produce this sound as a symbol, it is not written like this, but it is written like this, g, in IPA. So kh, g and ing, these are alveolar sound. So kh is voiceless, g and angma both are voiced. So many example in ringing. So in ringing we have this sound, ring and king. All right. In tongue we have this sound. In morning, at the end of morning we have this sound. At the beginning we have this sound, and at the beginning and at the end of this we have clock. So if you want to understand these the phonemic transcription and how to do it, so I have made several lectures in the same series of a course in phonetics. I shall add those links as well. So these are very detailed lectures about the transcription. Then we have glottals. Glottal sound, there is only one glottal sound, which is actually h. So what is glottal? So between our vocal folds, the space is called actually the glottis, and this is produced by the space between vocal fold. So h is a sound which is called glottal, which is comes have, whose, how. So once again here you can say there is w, but sounds just like who. There w is not actually pronounced whose, it is just whose, how. And there is also a sound which is very common to some people, or you can say we talk about a lot in phonetics about, and this is actually a glottal stop, and it is a sound you can produce, and many speakers even produce this sound, especially in American English and young British English. If you say oh, while the sound between first o and second o is actually a glottal stop. So sometimes speaker, instead of producing but, they say b. All right. So another issue, that we don't need to be confused with spelling and symbols of sound. So we are transcribing sounds, not letters, and there are many examples, especially in English. Symbols represent different form of spellings, because the reasons are that in English there are many words. If you look up their origin, they come from several backgrounds: Latin, French, Spanish, Italian. So these are some reasons. So sheep, two letters but only one sound representing them. Then same is the case with church. Ch is representing two sound, and sometimes, as I have shown you, and similarly in bang there are two letters but one sound. Similarly we have the example of raise. So there are s and e but only one sound, and there are a lot of such examples as well, where even the same spellings are representing different sounds. Then we have pace, pace. Here c represents s sound, but at many places like clock, c representing k sound. So there are certain example of English. So now this is one of the chart from the study of language. It was in 4th edition. So where you can say at the upper we have bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, such sounds, and here at the left side we have the manner of articulation, which we shall discuss in the incoming lecture. However, let me show you the table from the 7th edition as well. So if we come down here, yes, so this is, you can see this is the list of consonants: bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, palatal, velars and glottals, and it also shows that their place of articulation, which are voiced and which are voiceless, and their examples as well. So you can just stop the video and can read this. We have already discussed all about this. All right. Then this is the chart of IPA. There are many symbols which we usually discuss when we study phonetics in detail, and This is all about today's lecture. The next lecture will be about manner of articulation. So I hope you have understood it. Don't forget to give your feedback. Remember in your prayers. Jazakallahu khairan and thank you.